My name is Harper. I am 32. Last Thursday night, I stood in the back of a rented Hollywood loft and watched my 29-year-old sister steal 4 years of my life. The room was packed with influencers drinking pink champagne, while a massive LED screen behind the stage displayed a spinning frosted glass bottle. Aura Glow, the eczema miracle. Chloe stood at the microphone, wearing a tailored white suit. She told the crowd how she spent months in her tiny apartment kitchen, mixing botanicals in glass bowls to cure her own stubborn breakouts. The crowd murmured in admiration. I did not move. I kept my eyes fixed on the scrolling text beneath the spinning bottle on the screen. Active ingredients: 2.4% Centella asiatica, 0.8% colloidal oat, proprietary lipid ceramide delivery system. It was not a similar formula. It was my exact molecular blueprint. The specific ratios I spent 4,100 hours perfecting in a subterranean lab in Burbank. I knew the viscosity of that serum. I knew the exact melting point of the ceramide chain. I knew it because I built it. A Mother Patricia stood in the front row. She held her phone high above her head, recording every second of Chloe on stage. A tear tracked through her foundation. She looked radiant, bursting with the kind of unfiltered pride she usually reserved for holiday newsletters. She did not look back toward the exit. She did not know I was there. I was not invited. The memory of last Christmas tasted like ash in my mouth. I pictured our parents' kitchen in Ohio, the snow hitting the window panes. Chloe sitting at the granite island crying over the raw red patches creeping up her jawline. The dermatologist prescribed steroids that thinned her skin. I remember reaching into my travel bag. I pulled out a blank, unlabeled dropper bottle containing my final beta test phase. Use 2 drops at night, I had told her, keeping my voice low so our mother would not interrupt. It repairs the barrier, lipid by lipid. Do not show anyone yet. It is my life work. She took it. She smiled. She cleared her skin. Then she took the prototype to a discount contract manufacturer, slapped her name on it, and threw a party. On stage, Chloe paused her speech. The applause swelled. She scanned the room, drinking in the validation. Then her eyes drifted to the back of the room. They locked onto mine. The smile shifted. The corners of her mouth tightened into a calculated smirk, a silent challenge. She knew I saw the screen. She knew I recognized the theft. She also knew the dynamic of our family. Chloe takes, Harper accommodates. She bet her entire brand launch on the assumption that I would shrink into the background to keep the peace. Before I tell you what I did when she stepped off that stage, please take a moment to subscribe to Sweet Karma Life and drop your age and your city in the comments. I read every single one. Now let me take you back to the Champagne Tower, where I said 6 words that made her drop her glass. To understand the audacity of Chloe taking my work, you have to understand the math of our childhood in suburban Ohio. Chloe was the sun. I was the atmosphere built to support her. When I was 17, I worked late shifts at a pharmacy to buy a $40 thrift store prom dress. Chloe wore an $850 gown our parents bought her. When I took out $60,000 in student loans to pay for my chemistry degree, our parents gifted Chloe $35,000 in seed money to start a lifestyle blog that failed in 6 months. She never apologized. She just moved on to the next thing. So when she cornered me near the catering tables at her launch party, her tone was not apologetic. It was expectant. "Harper, do not make a scene," she whispered. Her manicured hand gripped my wrist tightly. "This is my moment. You are just a lab tech. I have the platform to actually sell this. Be a team player for once in your life." She squeezed my wrist, waiting for me to fold like I always did. Instead, I pulled my arm away. I looked at her perfectly powdered face and I said, "I will see you at Sunday dinner." I walked out of the party, leaving Chloe staring at the shattered champagne flute she just dropped on the floor. 2 days later, my parents summoned me to their house. The bass from the DJ booth vibrated through the floorboards of the rented loft. I turned my back on the massive LED screen. I needed air. I navigated through the crowd of influencers and industry executives. Waiters in black vests brushed past me carrying silver trays. I kept my eyes fixed on the heavy glass exit doors at the end of the room. I was 10 feet away from the exit when a hand clamped around my left forearm. The grip was tight enough to pinch the skin. I stopped walking. I turned around. Chloe stood there. The flashbulbs popped in the distance. The scent of her expensive floral perfume cut through the smell of spilled alcohol. She pulled me behind a towering pyramid of champagne glasses near the catering entrance. She did not look guilty. She looked inconvenienced. To understand the sheer audacity of her entitlement in that moment, you have to understand the ledger of our childhood. We grew up in a 4-bedroom colonial in suburban Ohio. It was the kind of neighborhood where manicured lawns and appearances functioned as currency. The math of our family was established early. Chloe was the sun. I was the atmosphere built to support her. I learned the exact cost of my existence when I was 17 years old. I worked closing shifts at a retail pharmacy 3 nights a week. I smelled like fluorescent lighting and rubbing alcohol. I saved up $40 to buy a vintage navy slip dress from a consignment shop for my senior prom. I sat on my bed and sewed a tear in the hem myself. 2 years later, Chloe wanted a custom gown for her junior prom. Our parents drove her to Chicago. They spent $850 on a beaded silk dress. She wore it for 4 hours. She spilled fruit punch down the front and left it crumpled on her bedroom floor for a month. No one said a word. The deficit was simply accepted. The financial gap widened when we left home. I wanted to study clinical chemistry. I wanted to build formulas that actually worked. I sat alone at our kitchen table the summer after high school graduation, surrounded by federal loan applications. I signed my name to $60,000 in debt. My father walked past me to get a cup of coffee. He patted my shoulder and told me, hard work builds character. 3 years later, Chloe decided college was stifling her creativity. She dropped out of her communications program. She wanted to be an influencer. She pitched a lifestyle blog to our parents over Thanksgiving turkey. The very next morning, my father transferred $35,000 into her checking account as seed money. She bought a professional camera. She bought a plane ticket to Tulum. She bought a designer wardrobe. The blog lasted 6 months. She never wrote a single post after February. The money vanished. She never apologized. She just moved back into her childhood bedroom and waited for the next bailout. I took extra weekend shifts in the university lab grading freshman exams to pay my rent. That was our dynamic. Chloe took, I absorbed the cost. So when she cornered me near the catering tables at her own launch party, her tone was not apologetic. It was expectant. "Harper, do not make a scene," she whispered. Her voice was flat. Her manicured hand gripped my wrist. "This is my moment. You are just a lab tech. I have the platform to actually sell this. I have the audience. Without me, that serum would sit in a beaker for the next 10 years. Be a team player for once in your life." She squeezed my wrist. She was waiting for the apology. She was waiting for me to lower my head and walk out the door in silence. That was my role. The accommodating older sister. The permanent shock absorber for her ambition. But standing there, watching her claim ownership of my sleepless nights, the math finally stopped making sense. The ledger balanced. The debt I owed this family evaporated. I did not pull away fast. I did not yell. I just twisted my arm until her fingers slipped off my skin. I smoothed the sleeve of my jacket. I looked at her perfectly powdered face. I looked at the exact spot on her jawline where my formula had healed her broken skin. "I will see you at Sunday dinner," I said. Those 7 words hung in the air. They were a promise. Chloe stared at me. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Her fingers twitched. The champagne flute she was holding slipped from her hand. It hit the concrete floor and shattered into a dozen pieces. Pale pink liquid splashed across the toes of her designer heels. I turned around and walked out the door. The cool night air hit my face. I requested a ride back to my apartment. My phone stayed silent for exactly 48 hours. On Saturday morning, the text arrived. It was from my mother. It was brief. "We need to talk. Be at the house tomorrow at 5. I knew what was waiting for me. I knew the stage was being set. My parents lived in a gated community an hour north of the city. Sunday dinners were usually reserved for polite conversation and passive comments about my dating life. But this Sunday was going to be a negotiation. They were going to try to buy my silence. They were going to offer me a fraction of my own worth to protect the family image. I spent Sunday afternoon printing out a single document from my home office. I placed it in my leather tote bag. I drove up the interstate with the radio turned off. The silence was clarifying. I pulled into the wide circular driveway of their brick house. Chloe had parked her luxury SUV near the front door. She had arrived early to control the narrative. I walked up the stone steps. I did not knock. I opened the door and stepped into the foyer. The smell of roasted chicken and tension hung heavy in the air. I walked into the kitchen. My father, Richard, sat in his leather recliner in the adjoining living room. He was staring at a golf tournament on the television. He turned the volume up when I walked in. He was actively avoiding the room. My mother stood at the granite island. She had prepared an elaborate charcuterie board. It was her strategy, food as a buffer. Chloe sat on a tall stool, tapping her manicured nails against the marble counter. She was scrolling on her phone. She looked profoundly bored by my presence. "Harper," my mother said. Her voice was overly bright, a fragile chirp designed to mask the impending ambush. "We are so glad you came. Family needs to stick together. We need to lift each other up." She slid a sleek 15-page legal document across the granite island. It stopped an inch from my hand. "Chloe is willing to bring you on as lead mixer," my mother said. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "She is offering you a 2% non-voting stake in Oraglow." 2%. I looked down at the physical paper resting on the gray marble counter. The document was 15 pages long. The text was printed in crisp black ink. The top page bore a shiny embossed logo. Oraglow. Chloe had spent money on a graphic designer before she even understood the science of the product. My mother stood on the other side of the island. She adjusted a slice of cured meat on her wooden serving board. She acted as if we were discussing a weekend vacation plan, not the theft of my intellectual property. 2%, non-voting stake, lead mixer. The title was a specific insult. It reduced my master's degree in clinical chemistry to the role of a line cook. "Family lifts each other up," my mother repeated. Her voice carried that familiar rehearsed rhythm. It was the same tone she used 12 years ago. I was 20 years old. I had saved $3,000 from my campus job to buy a used sedan. I needed it to drive to my off-campus lab rotation. 1 week after I bought the car, Chloe missed a stop sign and totaled her leased convertible. She needed a way to get to her unpaid fashion internship. My mother sat me down at this exact same kitchen island. She used that exact same phrase. Family lifts each other up. She handed Chloe the keys to my sedan. I spent the next semester taking a city bus in the snow. My mother viewed my resources as community property. She viewed Chloe as the sole beneficiary. I shifted my gaze to my father. He remained anchored in his leather chair in the adjacent room. The television screen flashed green and blue reflections across his glasses. He hit the volume button on the remote control. The polite clapping of a golf crowd filled the silence. My father never raised his voice. He never took a side. He believed his passive silence kept the peace. He did not realize his refusal to defend me was the loudest statement in the house. He was the enabler. He funded the illusion that Chloe was a self-made success. I looked at Chloe. She sat on a tall wooden stool. She did not even look at the contract she was asking me to sign. Her attention was focused entirely on her phone screen. Her thumbs moved rapidly. She was likely checking the view count on her latest launch party video. She wore a casual cashmere sweater. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun that probably took an hour to style. She wanted to look effortless. She wanted the world to believe brilliance just flowed from her fingertips. "It is a generous offer, Harper." She chimed in without lifting her eyes from the screen. Take it or leave it. We have investors waiting. Investors. The word caught my attention. A discount contract manufacturer and a rented loft did not require investors. She was scaling up. She needed me, bound by a non-disclosure agreement. The 15-page document on the counter was not a peace offering. It was a cage. My mother watched my face closely. She was waiting for the explosion. They both were. They expected me to yell about fairness. They expected me to recount the thousands of hours I spent in the lab. If I raised my voice, my mother would immediately soften her own tone. She would put a hand to her chest and call me emotional. She would tell me I was acting jealous. If I cried, they would dismiss me as weak. It was a well-worn script. I refused to read their script. I did not raise my voice. I did not shed a tear. I kept my breathing steady. I reached into my leather tote bag. I bypassed the cheap plastic pins. I pulled out a heavy silver fountain pen. I bought this pen the day I passed my final clinical board exams. The metal felt cold and solid in my hand. I clicked the top. The sound echoed sharply against the tile backsplash. Chloe finally looked up from her phone. Her brow furrowed. I placed the tip of the pen on the signature line of the last page. I did not flip through the preceding 14 pages. I did not read the non-compete clause. I did not read the severance terms. I signed my full legal name in smooth, dark ink. I set the pen down. I pushed the packet back across the granite. The room shifted. The tension broke so fast it felt like a change in air pressure. My mother let out a long breath. Her shoulders dropped. She reached out and patted my hand. I knew you would do the right thing, Harper, she said. She smiled a genuine, relieved smile. You will see. This will be fun. We are a team again. Chloe picked up the packet. She looked at my signature. A look of confusion crossed her face. She had prepared for a fight. My immediate surrender unsettled her, but her arrogance quickly overrode her suspicion. She tucked the document into her designer tote bag. Welcome aboard, she said. Her tone was dripping with condescension. I will have human resources send you the login credentials for the company portal on Monday. I nodded. I picked up my bag. I walked past the charcuterie board. I walked past my father and his television screen. I opened the front door and stepped out into the crisp Sunday afternoon air. I walked to my car. I got in and closed the door. I gripped the steering wheel and let out a single sharp laugh. They thought I had surrendered. They thought they had purchased my silence for 2% of a company built on my own stolen labor. They thought the contract was a leash to keep me controlled, but they did not understand the legal definition of the role they just gave me. As lead mixer, I was no longer an outsider, making unverified claims about intellectual property. I was a documented employee. I had a signed contract guaranteeing me high-level access to the internal operations of Origlow. They handed me the keys to the castle. I did not sign a surrender. I signed a Trojan horse. Monday morning, the automated email arrived in my inbox. It contained my employee identification number and a temporary password for the secure corporate drive. I logged in from my apartment. The dashboard loaded on my laptop screen. It was a gold mine of data. Over the next 3 weeks, I played my part perfectly. I went to the production facility. I organized the raw material inventory. I smiled in the background of Chloe and her social media content. But at night, the real work began. I sat at my kitchen table while the city slept. I pulled down the internal ledgers. I downloaded the supplier contracts. I tracked the money. I needed to see exactly how Chloe was planning to turn my prototype into a mass market product. And on the 21st night of my employment, I opened a folder labeled Q3 Distribution. The numbers on the screen did not make sense at first. Then the reality of what my sister had done settled in. The betrayal was not just against me anymore. The new conflict was sitting in a purchase order for 100,000 units, and it was going to burn people. I spent 21 days living a double life. During the daylight hours, I was the dutiful lead mixer. I wore a white lab coat with the Oraglow emblem stitched on the pocket. I stood next to Chloe in the sterile packing room while she filmed content for her millions of followers. She pointed the ring light at us. She wrapped her arm around my shoulder. She smiled into the camera lens and talked about the power of sisterhood. I smiled back. I organized the raw material inventory. I calibrated the testing equipment. I played the supportive older sister with flawless precision. My mother visited the facility twice a week, bringing gourmet coffee and pastries. She praised our teamwork. She patted herself on the back for resolving our dispute so beautifully. But the daylight hours were just theater. My actual work began after midnight. I sat at my kitchen table wrapped in a wool sweater with my laptop screen illuminating the dark room. The corporate portal was a labyrinth of encrypted folders. I sifted through shipping manifests. I cross-referenced vendor identification numbers. I tracked every dollar flowing in and out of the limited liability company. I needed to understand the exact scale of the machine Chloe built around my invention. On the 17th night, I found the master distributor file. The scope of her ambition crystallized on the screen. Chloe had not just launched a boutique internet brand. She had leveraged her massive social media following to secure an exclusive distribution agreement. The contract was signed with the largest beauty retailer in North America. The physical purchase order was a monumental document. The retailer demanded 100,000 units delivered to their regional distribution centers in 45 days. 100,000 units is a mountain of inventory. It requires coordinated logistics. It requires specialized freight. The financial commitment was staggering, $6.5 million. The timeline was brutal. The profit margins were tight. The pressure to deliver must have been suffocating her. But Chloe never mentioned the deal to me. She kept me isolated in the laboratory mixing small pilot batches while the actual manufacturing was outsourced to a massive industrial facility in New Jersey. I opened the supplier invoices for the New Jersey facility. I compared their raw material purchases against my original master formula. My formula relied on cold-pressed botanical extracts. The extraction process is slow and meticulous. It preserves the delicate lipid structures necessary to repair a compromised skin barrier. It is also expensive. It costs $85 per liter. I scanned the invoice on my screen. The New Jersey facility was not buying the botanical extract. They were buying a synthetic alternative. It costs $4 per liter. My heart rhythm changed. I leaned closer to the monitor. I pulled up the material safety data sheet for the synthetic substitute. It was a harsh chemical preservative. It extended shelf life and mimicked the texture of a ceramide, but it contained a high concentration of alcohol and volatile synthetic fragrances. To a person with normal skin, it might cause mild redness, but Oraglow was marketed specifically for severe eczema. It was targeted at women whose skin barriers were already broken down. Eczema is an immune response. The skin is raw and weeping. Applying this synthetic chemical to active eczema would not heal the tissue. The alcohol strips the remaining moisture from the skin. The synthetic fragrance inflames the exposed nerve endings. The result is a blistering rash that takes weeks to heal. It would cause a localized chemical burn. Chloe was not just cutting corners to hit her profit margins. She was engineering a medical disaster. 100,000 bottles of acid packaged in frosted glass and sold as a miracle cure. She was willing to disfigure her own audience to secure a $6.5 million payout. The ledger of our childhood was one thing. Stealing my intellectual property was a family dispute. But this crossed the line into mass negligence. I printed the supplier invoices and the safety data sheets. I did not wait for the morning. I drove to the Oraglow headquarters at 7 o'clock. Chloe was already there. She occupied a large corner office with floor-to-ceiling glass walls. She sat behind a sleek white desk, reviewing marketing mock-ups on her tablet. She wore a tailored blazer and oversized sunglasses pushed back into her hair. I walked in and closed the heavy glass door behind me. I did not sit down. I stood over her desk, forcing her to look up at me. I dropped the printed stack of papers directly onto her tablet. "What is this?" she asked. Her tone was annoyed. She pushed the papers aside. I pointed to the highlighted row on the invoice. You swapped the cold-pressed botanicals for a synthetic solvent, I said. My voice was low and steady. You authorized the New Jersey plant to mass-produce the serum using a known dermal irritant. Chloe let out a long breath. She leaned back in her ergonomic chair. She did not look panicked. She looked bored. It is a cost optimization measure, Harper. We have a massive purchase order to fulfill. The botanicals are back-ordered for 6 months, and they ruin the profit margin. The synthetic alternative passed the bare minimum safety check for cosmetic distribution. I placed both hands on the edge of her desk. I leaned forward. It passed the test for intact, healthy skin, I said. You are marketing this to people with eczema, people with microscopic fissures in their dermal layers. This chemical will enter their bloodstream. You are pouring salt into open wounds. It will burn their faces. You cannot ship this product. Chloe picked up her stylus. She tapped the screen of her tablet. She did not even look at me. We ship next month, she said. The marketing campaign is already paid for. The shelf space is secured. Do not come into my office and try to kill my deal because you are overly attached to some expensive plants. Stay in your lane, Harper. You mix the pilot batches. I run the business. I stood up straight. I looked around the pristine office. I looked at the framed magazine articles featuring her face on the wall. As the lead mixer on record, my signature is required on the final batch release forms before the shipping containers can leave the New Jersey facility. I said, I will not sign them. I am grounding the entire production run. If you try to bypass my signature, I will send these material safety data sheets directly to the compliance department of your retail partner. Chloe froze. The stylus stopped moving across her screen. The arrogant mask slipped. Her eyes darted up to meet mine. The silence in the room grew heavy. She realized I had found the leverage. I turned around and walked out of the glass office. I went back to my lab station. I waited for her next move. I knew she would not back down. She had 6.5 million reasons to eliminate me. And the real conflict was about to erupt. At exactly 6:45 the next morning, I pulled my car into the employee parking lot of the Burbank production facility. The marine layer still hung low over the asphalt. The air was damp and cold. I walked up to the side entrance holding my coffee. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my white plastic keycard. I tapped it against the black magnetic reader mounted on the brick wall. I expected the familiar green flash and the mechanical click of the deadbolt releasing. Instead, the machine emitted a sharp two-tone beep. A solid red light illuminated the plastic casing. I tapped the card a second time. The light stayed red. Through the reinforced glass door, I saw the overnight security guard approaching. His name was David. He usually greeted me with a nod and a comment about the traffic on the interstate. Today, he did not make eye contact. He unclipped a two-way radio from his belt. He unlocked the door manually, but only opened it 3 inches. He stood in the narrow gap blocking my entry. I am sorry, Miss Davis, he said. He looked down at the pavement. The system administrator revoked your access at midnight. I have specific instructions from upper management to escort you off the property if you try to enter the building. I did not argue with David. He was earning $20 an hour. He was not the architect of this lockout. He was just the messenger forced to do the dirty work. I put the plastic card back into my pocket. I nodded to him. I turned around and walked back to my car. I started the engine and turned on the heater. At 7 o'clock, my phone vibrated in the cup holder. A new email notification appeared on the screen. The sender was not the Human Resources Department. It was a senior partner at a Century City corporate law firm. The subject line read, Notice of Immediate Termination. I opened the digital attachment. It was a formal letter drafted on heavy corporate letterhead. It stated my employment at Oraglow was terminated effective immediately for gross insubordination and creating a hostile work environment. The second paragraph was a carefully constructed legal threat. It reminded me of the strict confidentiality clause in my employment contract. It warned me that any attempt to contact Origlow vendors, distributors, or retail partners would result in immediate litigation for tortious interference. Chloe believed hiring an expensive lawyer to send a threatening document would force me into submission. She thought a PDF file was a shield. I drove back to my apartment in silence. I unlocked my front door and walked into the kitchen. The digital clock on the microwave read 8:15. My phone rang. The caller identification displayed my mother. I set the phone on the granite counter and pressed the speaker button. "Harper," my mother began. Her voice lacked its usual bright artificial chirp. She sounded exhausted and exasperated. "Why do you always have to ruin your sister and her success?" I leaned against the counter. I did not interrupt her. "She had to fire you, Harper," my mother continued. "You barged into her office. You made ridiculous demands about production costs. You left her no choice. She is under immense pressure right now with this retail launch." I looked out the kitchen window at the morning traffic far below. "Mom, the synthetic substitute she authorized is a severe dermal hazard," I said. My voice was stripped of any emotion. "It is a cheap chemical solvent. If she ships that batch to women suffering from severe eczema, it will cause blistering. It will cause localized chemical burns." I grounded the production run to prevent a medical catastrophe. My mother sighed loudly into the receiver. "You are exaggerating again, Harper. Chloe told me the lab passed the safety checks." "You do not understand how the beauty industry works. Everyone cuts corners to scale up. You are just being jealous and difficult because she is the one running a $6.5 million company. If you try to sabotage this retail deal, Chloe will sue you for everything you have." A second voice echoed through the speaker. My father was shouting from the living room background. "Just let it go, Harper. Stop causing trouble. We are tired of the drama. Why can you not just be happy for your sister for once?" I stared at the phone resting on the granite. For 32 years, I believed my parents were simply misguided. I thought their blatant favoritism was a psychological blind spot they could not control. But listening to them defend a business decision that would physically harm thousands of unsuspecting women, the reality shifted. They were not blind. They were fully complicit. They were willing to sacrifice the health and safety of strangers just to protect Chloe from facing the consequences of her own greed. They were willing to let women burn to keep the illusion of the golden child intact. The cost of Chloe and her success was now physical pain for other people, and my parents endorsed it. That was the exact moment the final thread of my family loyalty snapped. The invisible tether holding me to their expectations dissolved completely into the air. I did not feel sad. I did not feel the familiar sting of rejection. I felt a cold, sharp clarity. I reached forward and pressed the red button on the screen, cutting my mother off mid-sentence. I walked over to my home office desk. Sitting next to my monitor was a small wooden frame. It held the only family photograph I owned, a picture from my college graduation. My father was looking at his watch. My mother was adjusting Chloe's hair, and I was standing on the end, holding my diploma. I picked up the frame. I did not throw it. I simply turned it over and placed it face down on the dark wood of the desk. The sting of rejection was gone. In its place was a cold, sharp clarity. I opened my encrypted contact list. I scrolled down to the letter J. Jillian was a 55-year-old intellectual property litigator. She wore tailored charcoal suits and dismantled corporate monopolies for a living. I met her 5 years ago when she gave a guest lecture on chemical patents at my university. She was sharp, pragmatic, and entirely ruthless. We kept in touch. She mentored me through the early stages of my career. When I first developed the eczema serum, I brought her the preliminary lab results. She looked at the complex lipid structures on the paper and told me I had lightning in a bottle. She told me to trust no one, not even my own blood. I listened to her. I tapped her name. The line rang twice. "Jillian speaking." Her voice was crisp and alert. "Jillian," I said. I stood by the window and watched the city skyline emerge from the morning fog. My sister just tried to cut me out of a $6.5 million retail deal using my stolen formula. She locked me out of the facility and fired me to bypass my safety block on a hazardous production run. The line went quiet for 3 seconds. Jillian did not ask for the emotional backstory. She did not ask how I felt about my family betraying me. She processed the raw data. "Did she scale up the prototype?" Jillian asked. Her voice crackled over the line, cool and deadly. "Yes," I said. "She outsourced it to a massive facility in New Jersey. They manufactured 100,000 units. They are sitting in mixing vats right now." "Then it is time to drop the hammer," Jillian replied. "I need you to come to my office. We have federal filings to activate." Chloe thought firing me solved her problem. She thought locking the glass door to the laboratory removed the obstacle. She assumed I was a defenseless lab technician who would crumble under the weight of a legal threat from a Century City law firm. But my sister made one critical mathematical error when she stole my prototype last Christmas. She built her entire $6.5 million empire on a foundation she did not own. She did not know what I kept locked in a fireproof safe inside Jillian in her office. I sat in a leather chair across from Jillian in her Century City corner office. The walls were lined with heavy law books and framed appellate court victories. Jillian poured 2 glasses of sparkling water from a glass carafe on her desk. She did not ask me how I was feeling. She knew emotion was irrelevant in this room. We were here to execute a structural demolition. Here is the piece of the puzzle my sister and my parents did not know. 3 years ago, I did not just invent a clinical-grade eczema serum. I protected it. I knew the value of my own mind. I also knew the environment I was raised in. I grew up watching my family appropriate my resources whenever it suited their narrative. I was not going to let them take my life work. At 29 years old, I had $14,500 sitting in a high-yield savings account. It was the exact amount I needed for a 5% down payment on a modest 2-bedroom townhouse in Pasadena. I had toured the property. I had the mortgage pre-approval paperwork sitting on my kitchen counter. But I looked at the beaker of stabilized serum on my lab bench, and I made a choice. I called the real estate agent and canceled the escrow. I took a cashier check to Jillian instead. I paid her to file a comprehensive utility and chemical patent with the federal government. Jillian walked over to a locked filing cabinet. She pulled out a thick manila envelope and laid it flat on her mahogany desk. She slid a heavy document printed on archival paper toward me. It bore the gold seal of the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Patent number 89432. The document legally established me as the sole inventor and owner of the exact molecular structure, the lipid ceramide delivery system, and the specific active ingredient ratios of the formula. But a patent is just a piece of paper if you cannot enforce it. The real trap was not legal. The real trap was scientific. When Chloe was crying in our parents' kitchen last Christmas, I gave her a small dropper bottle to heal her face. She took that sample to a discount contract manufacturer. They ran it through a mass spectrometer to identify the ingredients. They reverse-engineered the ingredient list and built her a brand. But a mass spectrometer only tells you what ingredients are in the bottle. It does not tell you how those ingredients are put together. Chloe did not steal a finished commercial product. She stole an early-stage beta prototype. In cosmetic chemistry, combining water-based botanical extracts with heavy ceramide lipids is like trying to force magnets together by their identical poles. They naturally repel each other. If you just mix them in a vat, they will temporarily blend, but within a few weeks, the laws of thermodynamics take over. The molecules reject one another. The formula degrades and separates. To create a commercial skincare product that can sit on a warehouse shelf for 2 years without spoiling, you have to stabilize the emulsion. You have to introduce a proprietary emulsification sequence. It requires heating the water phase to exactly 160 degrees while keeping the oil phase at 70 degrees, then shearing them together at 10,000 revolutions per minute under a vacuum to remove all oxygen. That specific sequence binds the molecules permanently. That sequence is the secret. That sequence is what I locked safely inside patent number 89432. Chloe did not have the sequence. She just had a list of ingredients and a lot of unearned confidence. She stole a ticking time bomb. "Did you tell her the prototype was unstable?" Jillian asked, taking a sip of her water. "No," I replied. "I told her to keep it refrigerated and use it quickly." She assumed it was a finished formula. When she scaled up production to 100,000 units, the New Jersey facility just dumped the raw materials into industrial mixing tanks and turned on the standard agitators. Jillian smiled. It was a sharp, predatory smile. "And she swapped your cold-pressed botanicals for a cheap synthetic solvent." "Yes," I said, "which means she altered the specific gravity of the water phase. The synthetic solvent acts as an accelerant. It will chew through whatever weak molecular bonds the discount manufacturer managed to create. So we do not need to file a federal injunction today," Jillian said, leaning back in her chair. "We do not need to send a cease and desist letter right now. If we shut down her production line today, she can claim we caused her to breach her retail contract. She could play the victim. She could tell her followers you sabotaged her out of jealousy." I looked at the gold seal on the patent. "What is the alternative?" "We wait," Jillian said. "We let physical chemistry do the work. The retailer requires the final product to pass a visual shelf stability test before they authorize the final payment and accept the freight delivery. According to your timeline, her entire inventory is currently sitting in holding vats in New Jersey. They are waiting to be poured into those expensive frosted glass bottles. How long until the synthetic solvent breaks the emulsion?" I did the math in my head. I factored in the ambient temperature of an industrial warehouse in early autumn. I factored in the high alcohol content of the cheap preservative she authorized. 2 weeks, I said. Maximum. The lipids will separate from the water. The serum will turn into a clumpy white sludge with a layer of yellow chemical oil floating on top. It will look like spoiled milk. "Then we sit on our hands," Jillian said, closing the file folder. "We let her miss the shipping deadline. We let her default on a $6.5 million distribution contract. We let her arrogant negligence back her into a corner she cannot buy her way out of." I left Jillian and her office. I drove back to my apartment. For the next 12 days, I lived a quiet, peaceful life. I ignored the termination letter from her Century City lawyers. I ignored 3 voicemails from my mother demanding I apologize to my sister. I went for long runs in the morning. I drank premium coffee. I read novels on my balcony. I let the silence stretch out. I did not need to fight my family anymore. I did not need to scream to be heard. I just needed to let the inevitable laws of science run their course. Gaslighting works in a living room argument. Emotional manipulation works when you are trying to divide a family. But you cannot gaslight thermodynamics. You cannot manipulate a molecular structure. On the 13th day, the silence broke. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The massive retail launch was exactly 14 days away. The promotional displays were already being built in stores across the country. I was sitting at my kitchen island eating a salad when my phone screen lit up. It was a text message from Chloe. "Harper, please call me." I kept eating my lunch. 10 minutes later, the screen illuminated again. "Are you ignoring me? I need your help. Something is wrong at the New Jersey plant." I set my fork down. I watched the digital clock on my microwave tick forward. The notifications began to arrive in rapid succession. The calm, entitled tone of a self-appointed chief executive officer was gone. The panic was bleeding through the screen. "Harper, pick up the phone. The lab sent me a video of the holding vats. The product is separating. It looks like cottage cheese. Please, the retailer needs the final stability sign-off tomorrow morning. If I do not sign it, they cancel the purchase orders. Harper, please." The prototype had failed. The ticking time bomb had finally detonated. The 100,000 units of stolen glory had turned into a toxic, unmarketable sludge. My sister had built her castle on a swamp, and the foundation just gave way. I picked up my phone and turned on the Do Not Disturb feature. The real crisis was just beginning. Over the next 48 hours, my phone battery drained twice, just from the sheer volume of incoming notifications. I did not answer a single call. I listened to the voicemails while watering my houseplants or folding my laundry. Chloe left 14 separate audio messages. The progression of her tone was a masterclass in panic. The first message was irritated. "Harper, pick up the phone. The lab needs a formulation adjustment. Call me." By the seventh message, her voice was shaking. "Harper, the product is separating in the vats. The New Jersey plant manager sent me a video. It looks like cottage cheese. There is a layer of yellow chemical oil floating on top of the water phase. You have to call me back." The final message arrived on Wednesday night. It was barely a whisper, recorded from what sounded like a bathroom stall. "Please, the retailer is asking for the final shelf stability test results. If I do not provide the certification by Friday, they cancel the purchase orders. Pick up the phone." I ignored all of them. I knew the financial architecture of her retail deal. I read the master contract on the corporate portal before she locked me out of the system. The $6.5 million agreement was structured on net 60 payment terms. That meant the retailer did not pay a single dime until 60 days after the product hit their warehouse shelves. To fund the massive manufacturing run, Chloe had to take out a commercial bridge loan. She used her own limited liability company as the primary borrower, but she signed a personal guarantee to secure the capital. If the product did not ship, the retailer walked away clean. Chloe would be left holding a bill for $1.2 million in raw materials, labor, and freight costs. My sister did not have $1.2 million. Influencer wealth is often a fragile illusion, built on gifted clothing and sponsored resort stays. She lived in a modern architectural home in the hills, but the mortgage consumed 70% of her monthly income. She leased her luxury vehicle. She bought expensive modern art on credit. She operated on the assumption that the next big payout was always guaranteed. The eczema serum was supposed to be her ultimate safety net. Instead, it was a concrete block tied to her ankle, and she was currently treading water. On Thursday morning at 9:15, a heavy fist pounded on my apartment door. The knocking did not stop. It was a frantic, continuous rhythm that echoed down the quiet hallway. I looked through the brass peephole. Chloe stood there. My mother stood right behind her. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. The visual contrast was striking. I was wearing gray sweatpants and a plain cotton shirt, holding a mug of black coffee. Chloe was wearing the same designer blazer she wore in her social media posts 2 days ago, but the fabric was wrinkled. Her hair was pulled into a harsh, messy knot. Her makeup was smeared under her eyes. My mother looked worse. She clutched her leather handbag against her chest like a protective shield. Her face was pale. The polished suburban matriarch mask was entirely gone. Chloe pushed past me into the living room without waiting for an invitation. "You have to fix this," she demanded. She paced across my rug. Her breathing was shallow and fast. "You are the chemist. Tell me the stabilizer ratio right now. I need the exact sequence to bind the emulsion before noon." I closed the front door. I leaned against the frame. I took a slow sip of my coffee. The ceramic mug felt warm in my hands. I did not offer them a seat. "I do not work for you, Chloe," I said. My voice was quiet and flat. "You had your Century City lawyer send me a termination letter. You locked my keycard. I am legally barred from assisting Oraglow operations." She stopped pacing. She glared at me. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. "Do not play games with me, Harper. The New Jersey facility manager says the cheap synthetic preservative altered the specific gravity of the water phase. The chemical bond shattered. The entire 100,000 unit batch is toxic waste. If I cannot give them a stabilizing sequence, they are going to flush the vats and bill me for the hazardous material cleanup." You swapped a cold-pressed botanical for an industrial solvent to save $80 a liter, I replied. You poured chemical gasoline onto a delicate lipid chain. Science does not care about your profit margins. You manufactured a chemical burn. Now you own a warehouse full of it. Chloe lifted her chin, trying to hold on to her polished facade. She crossed her arms defensively. So this is a shakedown, she sneered. Is that what this is? Are you blackmailing me? Fine, Harper, name your price. How much money do you want to give me the stabilization sequence? I let out a short, hollow laugh. You do not have any money to give me, Chloe, I said. I read your master contract. If you do not ship that product tomorrow, you default on a $1.2 million bridge loan. The lenders will seize your architectural home. They will liquidate your car. You cannot buy your way out of this because you are already broke. My mother broke her silence. She did not yell. She started crying. It was not the performative crying she used to win minor arguments at the dinner table. It was genuine, deep-rooted terror. Harper, she is going to lose everything, my mother pleaded. Her voice cracked. She stepped toward me. How can you stand there and watch this happen? How can you be so cruel to your own flesh and blood? I looked at the woman who raised me, the woman who handed my car keys to my sister 12 years ago, the woman who told me I was ruining Chloe and her success just 48 hours prior. I am not causing her bankruptcy. Mom, I said, maintaining direct eye contact. Her own arrogance is bankrupting her. I tried to stop the production run. I warned both of you the formula would fail. You told me to stay in my lane. Now you are standing in my living room demanding I save her from the consequences of a decision she made. My mother covered her face with her hands. She let out a muffled sob. Chloe stood frozen in the center of the room. The reality of the numbers had finally crushed her ego. Her attempt to act powerful evaporated. She was out of moves. She could not manipulate her way out of a chemical failure. She needed my mind. She needed the proprietary emulsification sequence locked inside a federal patent she did not know existed. Please, Harper, Chloe whispered. The word sounded unfamiliar in her mouth. She had not asked me for a favor with genuine humility since we were children. I will do whatever you want. I will give you your job back. Just tell me how to fix the emulsion so I can ship the product. I looked at my sister. I walked over to the kitchen island. I set my coffee mug down on the granite counter. The ceramic base made a soft thud against the stone. I opened the top drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I placed it flat on the counter next to my coffee. I will fix the formula, I said. I will give you the exact stabilization sequence you need to pass the retail inspection and ship those bottles tomorrow morning. Chloe let out a breath she had been holding. Her shoulders slumped. Thank you, she breathed. I held up my hand to stop her. I will do it, I said, on one condition. I tapped my index finger against the blank white paper resting on the granite. You are going to sign this document first. Chloe stared at the blank white paper resting on my granite kitchen counter. Her eyes darted from the document to my face. The panic radiating from her was palpable. She reached out and placed her hand over the paper as if she could hide it. Anything, she gasped. Her polished influencer facade was fracturing in real time. I will double your equity. I will give you 4%. I will give you 10% of the entire company, Harper. You can be the chief scientific officer. Just tell me how to fix the emulsion. I shook my head. Chloe always viewed money as a universal eraser. She believed a percentage point could wipe away years of disrespect. She offered equity the same way she operated in our childhood. When I was 22 years old, I saved $2,000 from a summer internship. Chloe needed a security deposit for her first apartment. She promised to pay me back with 5% interest by October. I gave her a cashier check. 2 weeks later, I saw a photo of her on social media carrying a new designer handbag that cost exactly $2,000. I never saw my money again. Her equity was monopoly currency. It held zero value in my apartment. I pulled my hand back from the counter. "I am not interested in your equity," I said. I tapped the top of the document. "Read the header." Chloe moved her hand. She leaned forward. Her eyes scanned the bold black text at the top of the page. It was a formal legal instrument drafted by Jillian the afternoon before. Declaration of Inventorship. "You are going to sign this," I said. My voice remained level. "It states unequivocally that I am the sole creator, inventor, and owner of the AuraGlow formula. It states that you acted without my authorization in your initial production run. It legally severs your claim to the intellectual property." Chloe hesitated. Her breath hitched. She read the first paragraph. "If I sign this, I am admitting I do not own the product. I am admitting I stole it. It gives you the power to pull the formula whenever you want." "Yes," I replied. "That is exactly what it does." She took a step back from the counter. "I cannot sign that. I need my corporate attorney to review this first. The retail contract requires me to hold the intellectual property rights free and clear. If the retailer finds out I do not own the formula, they will terminate the $6.5 million purchase order." I took a slow sip of my coffee and looked at the digital clock on the microwave. "It is 9:30 right now," I said, outlining the exact math of her situation. "Your Century City lawyers will take at least 3 days to draft a counterproposal. You do not have 3 days. You told me you have until noon. You have exactly 2.5 hours before the New Jersey facility flushes your inventory and bills you for the hazardous waste cleanup. If you do not sign it right this second, the retailer lawyers will file a breach of contract lawsuit by Friday morning. They will pierce your corporate veil. They will seize your architectural home. You will be bankrupt before the weekend." The silence in the kitchen was heavy. The ticking of the wall clock sounded like a metronome counting down her career. Chloe instinctively reached into her pocket for her phone to call her legal team, but she froze. She knew I was right. An expensive lawyer could not stop a chemical reaction in a warehouse across the country. My mother stepped forward. She dropped her leather handbag onto the floor. She grabbed a pen from the ceramic cup next to my microwave. She shoved the pen directly into Chloe in her right hand. "Just sign the stupid paper, Chloe," my mother demanded. Her voice was shrill. It was the sound of a woman watching her proxy success slip down the drain. She did not understand the legal weight of the document. She viewed the contract through the lens of a suburban sibling rivalry. It is just vanity titles. She just wants the credit. "Sign it so we can save the company and ship the product." Chloe looked at our mother. "Mom, this is a legal transfer of ownership. I cannot do this without legal counsel." "Sign it," my mother hissed. "We do not have time for lawyers or pride. Your house is on the line." "She's just being petty. Let her have her piece of paper." Chloe looked back at me. Her jaw clenched. The resentment in her eyes was sharp enough to cut glass. She realized she was completely backed into a corner with the clock running out. She placed the document flat on the granite. She pressed the pen to the paper. She signed her full legal name on the bottom line. The signature was aggressive and jagged. She threw the pen at me. It bounced off my chest and clattered onto the hardwood floor. "Fine," she spat. "You are the inventor. You win. Now give me the stabilization sequence. The plant manager is waiting for my text message." I picked up the signed Declaration of Inventorship. I checked the signature. I folded the heavy paper in half and slid it into the pocket of my sweatpants. I reached into the drawer and pulled out a yellow square sticky note. I picked up a different pen. I wrote down 3 lines of text. Polysorbate 80 and cetyl alcohol. Heat water phase to 140 degrees. Shear for 20 minutes at high speed. I handed her the yellow square. Chloe snatched it from my fingers. She pulled out her phone and immediately typed the instructions into a text message. She hit send. She did not say thank you. She did not apologize. She turned on her heel and walked toward the front door. My mother followed her, pausing only to give me a look of deep, profound disappointment. "You really broke this family today, Harper," my mother said. "I hope your little piece of paper keeps you warm at night." They walked out. The heavy door clicked shut behind them. I stood alone in my kitchen. I poured the rest of my coffee down the sink. I did not break the family. The family was broken the day they decided my boundaries were an inconvenience. I just stopped paying the repair bill. What Chloe did not know was the exact science of the yellow sticky note she just sent to New Jersey. I did not give her a hazardous formula. I did not give her poison. The sequence I wrote down is a standard, perfectly safe cosmetic emulsifier ratio. Within 2 hours, the industrial mixers in the factory would bind the separated sludge back together. The texture would become smooth and milky. It would look beautiful in the frosted glass bottles. It would easily pass the visual shelf stability test required by the retailer. Chloe would get her shipping authorization. She would send 100,000 units to the distribution centers, but cosmetic chemistry is an exact discipline. When you introduce a standard polysorbate emulsifier to the cheap, synthetic solvent Chloe chose to use, it creates a specific chemical reaction called micellar encapsulation. The new emulsifier would bind the water and oil, but it would also build microscopic cages around the active botanical ingredients. The Centella asiatica and the colloidal oat would be permanently trapped inside those cages. The molecules would become too large to penetrate the human skin barrier. The active ingredients were rendered entirely inert. The serum would not burn anyone. It would not cause a blistering rash. It was completely safe. But it also would not heal a single patch of eczema. It would do absolutely nothing. I took away the cure. Chloe now owned 100,000 bottles of slightly viscous, expensive scented water. She had a stable product. She had her massive retail launch scheduled for the following week. She thought she had outsmarted the crisis. She thought the signed document in my pocket was just a vanity trophy. She did not realize she was marching toward a public execution of her own brand. The launch day in Manhattan was set, and Jillian already had the federal injunction paperwork finalized on her desk. Fifth Avenue in Manhattan always feels like a movie set. On this particular Tuesday morning, the air was crisp. The sidewalk outside the flagship retail store was barricaded by pink velvet ropes. Security guards wearing black suits managed a crowd of photographers and beauty influencers. Inside the massive store, the lighting was meticulously engineered to make every person look flawless. Towers of Oraglow boxes were stacked near the front registers. The frosted glass bottles gleamed under the warm spotlights. It was a monument to stolen labor. Chloe stood in the center of the showroom. She wore a tailored silk dress the color of champagne. She posed for the cameras, holding a bottle of the stabilized serum. She looked victorious. She thought she had beaten the system. She believed my yellow sticky note was her ultimate salvation. She shipped 100,000 units of inert water to the distribution centers right on schedule. The retailer received the inventory. The visual inspection passed without raising any alarms. The purchase order was secured. She was just hours away from her initial payout. She thought she had won. A group of senior retail executives stood near the back of the room. They wore expensive dark suits. They held crystal glasses. They were quietly celebrating a massive projected revenue quarter. The lead executive was a man named Marcus. He managed a supply chain worth billions. He stood with his arms crossed, nodding approvingly as Chloe walked toward the center stage to take the microphone. The ambient background music faded out. The crowd hushed. Chloe tapped the microphone twice. "Thank you all for coming," she began. Her voice echoed through the high ceilings of the showroom. "This brand is a testament to perseverance. I formulated this serum in my own kitchen because I believed women deserved a transparent, honest solution to their skin struggles." She paused for effect. She smiled a practiced, humble smile. "Today, we are not just launching a skincare line. We are launching a movement." I did not let her finish the next sentence. I walked through the heavy glass front doors. I did not wear silk. I wore a structured charcoal blazer and flat leather shoes. I walked with deliberate purpose. Jillian walked right beside me, carrying a thick brown manila envelope. Two men in plain gray suits flanked us. They were private process servers Jillian hired for their clinical efficiency. The security guards near the entrance moved to intercept us. Jillian flashed a gold medal badge she carried for federal courthouse access. It was enough to make the guards hesitate for 3 seconds. 3 seconds was all we needed. We walked directly into the center of the launch party. The crowd naturally parted. The photographers lowered their cameras. The room went entirely quiet. The only sound was the rhythmic clicking of my flat shoes against the polished marble floor. Chloe stopped speaking. She gripped the microphone stand, her knuckles turned white. Her eyes widened as she registered my presence in the building. Then she saw Jillian. She instantly recognized the sharp aesthetic of a corporate litigator. We bypassed Chloe completely. We walked straight toward the group of executives holding the champagne. Jillian stopped 2 feet in front of Marcus. She did not raise her voice, but the pristine acoustics of the room carried her words to every corner. "Excuse me, gentlemen," Jillian said. Her tone was polite, but carried the weight of a falling anvil. "Are you the managing director of this retail division?" Marcus lowered his crystal glass. He looked confused. "Yes, I am," he replied. "Who are you?" Jillian held out the thick brown envelope. The process server next to her stepped forward and handed Marcus a second, identical packet. "I am the legal counsel representing Harper Davis," Jillian stated. She gestured toward me with an open hand. "My client is the sole patent holder of the formula currently being marketed and distributed as Oraglow. She holds the federal utility and chemical patent for the lipid ceramide delivery system you are currently stocking on your shelves." The color drained from the face of the retail director. He did not open the envelope right away. He stared at Jillian, trying to process the magnitude of the claim. "What are you talking about?" he asked. His voice was tight. "We vetted this brand thoroughly. We have a signed guarantee of intellectual property ownership from the founder. We wired a deposit based on those warranties." "You have a fraudulent guarantee," Jillian corrected him smoothly. "We are serving your corporate entity with a formal cease and desist order. Included in that packet is a federal injunction signed by a judge at 8 o'clock this morning. It mandates the immediate halt of all Oraglow sales pending an intellectual property theft investigation." The silence in the room transformed into a vacuum. The executives exchanged panicked glances. $6.5 million of legal liability had just walked through their front door. The photographers slowly raised their cameras again, sensing a different kind of story unfolding in front of them. Chloe dropped the microphone. It hit the marble floor. A sharp, shrill feedback noise pierced the air, causing several people to wince and cover their ears. "She is lying!" Chloe screamed. Her voice was frantic, breaking the polished atmosphere she had cultivated. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "I own this brand. I built it. She is just a disgruntled former employee trying to ruin my launch because she is jealous. Do not listen to a word she says." Marcus looked from Chloe to me. He was a businessman, calculating immediate risk. He needed undeniable proof. "Miss Davis," he said, addressing me directly, "do you have documentation to support this claim? Right now. A patent application can be contested. It takes years to litigate. We cannot pull a flagship product on launch day based on an unresolved family dispute." I did not answer him right away. I let the tension hold. I reached into the interior pocket of my charcoal blazer. I pulled out a single sheet of heavy paper folded precisely in half. I walked past Jillian. I walked right up to the retail director. I handed him the document. It was the same paper Chloe signed on my granite kitchen counter 7 days ago. "This is not a patent application," I said calmly. My voice was steady and even. "Read the header." Marcus unfolded the paper. His eyes tracked across the black ink. He read the words, "Declaration of Inventorship," out loud. The executives crowded around him, reading over his shoulder. "Read the bottom line," I instructed him. "Read the signature." Marcus looked at the bottom of the page. He looked at Chloe. "She signed this," he whispered. He looked back at me. "It states you are the sole creator and she acted without authorization." He shook his head. His business instincts were processing the disaster. "She admitted she does not own the formula." I turned to face my sister. She stood near the fallen microphone. She looked incredibly small. The tailored champagne dress suddenly looked like a costume she had outgrown. The cameras flashed, capturing her terror. "You own the limited liability company, Chloe," I said. The acoustics of the high ceiling amplified my words. "You own the marketing budget. You own the frosted glass bottles and the social media handles. But you signed a legal confession that I own the actual formula. You surrendered your claim to the intellectual property to save your own ego last week. And in doing so, you just sold $6.5 million of stolen property to a national retailer." Chloe took a step backward. Her heel caught on the microphone wire. She stumbled, but caught herself on the display table. A dozen glass bottles rattled against each other. "Mom," she whispered, looking toward the front row. Our mother was there, standing near the velvet ropes. She held her phone in her hand, but she was not recording anymore. Her face was an unreadable mask of shock. She could not fix this. She could not write a check to make a federal injunction disappear. She could not guilt-trip a corporate retail executive into ignoring fraud. Jillian checked her watch. "The store is scheduled to open to the public in exactly 12 minutes, Jillian told the executives. "If a single bottle of that product crosses a register scan, we will add willful infringement to the lawsuit. I suggest you lock your doors." Marcus did not hesitate. He turned to his security detail. "Clear the room," he ordered. He pointed to the towering Oraglow displays. "Take all of it down. Move it to the back storage room. Do not let anyone purchase this product. We are terminating the vendor contract immediately." The room erupted into organized chaos. Security guards began ushering influencers and photographers toward the exits. Waiters gathered the champagne glasses. Chloe stood frozen, watching her entire empire get dismantled by employees in polo shirts carrying cardboard boxes. They swept the expensive frosted bottles off the shelves. They tore down the promotional posters featuring her face. The dream she stole was evaporating in front of her eyes. The flagship doors never opened to the public that morning. I stood near the exit and watched a retail empire dismantle a launch in real time. Warehouse staff rolled heavy gray utility carts onto the pristine showroom floor. They loaded the frosted glass bottles by the hundreds. The clanking of the glass sounded like a rainstorm echoing against the high ceilings. Marcus, the retail director, did not look at Chloe again. He pulled his phone from his suit pocket and walked away to call his corporate legal department. Chloe sat on the edge of a mahogany display table. The champagne silk dress wrinkled around her knees. She held her face in her hands. She did not cry loudly. It was a silent, hollow realization. Her platform was built entirely on aesthetics. Aesthetics cannot shield anyone from federal fraud charges. The fallout was swift and legally devastating. By Friday afternoon, the national beauty retailer officially filed a breach of contract lawsuit in the Southern District of New York. Chloe had signed a specific indemnification clause when she accepted the initial purchase order. She guaranteed in writing that she owned the intellectual property free and clear of any encumbrances. Because she lied, she was personally liable for the financial damages. The retailer sued her for the $6.5 million projected revenue loss, plus punitive damages and attorney fees. She tried to use her social media following to garner sympathy. She posted a tearful video claiming she was the victim of a corporate misunderstanding. The internet did not forgive her. Investigative journalists found the federal injunction public records. They published the truth about her stealing the clinical formula from her older sister. She lost 2 million followers in 48 hours. Her sponsors dropped her immediately. Brands do not associate with documented liability. The math of her lifestyle collapsed within weeks. The commercial lenders called in the $1.2 million bridge loan she used to manufacture the inert water. She could not pay the balance. 30 days later, a flatbed tow truck pulled into the driveway of her architectural home in the hills. The driver attached a heavy steel cable to the axle of her luxury sport utility vehicle and dragged it down the street. 2 months after the missed payments, the process server arrived at her front door. He did not ask for an autograph. He handed her a thick manila envelope containing a formal notice of default and a foreclosure summons from the bank. She was not dragged out of the house that day, but the legal countdown had officially started. The bank was seizing the property. She spent her days packing her designer wardrobe into cheap cardboard boxes, preparing for the inevitable move back to her childhood bedroom in suburban Ohio. She was 29 years old and carrying a 7-figure debt she would likely never escape. My parents refused to accept the reality of the situation. They still viewed Chloe as the golden child who just needed a temporary bailout. My father logged into his retirement portal. He liquidated his entire 401k account. He cashed out his pension early, taking a staggering tax penalty. He and my mother wired $400,000 to a defense attorney, hoping to fight the retailer in federal court. The money evaporated in 6 weeks of billable hours. The corporate lawyers buried them in endless discovery motions. My parents drained their life savings to protect a lie. They were left with nothing but Social Security checks and a heavy silence in their empty suburban house. Then, the phone calls started. My mother called my cell phone 22 times in a single week. I listened to the voicemails while I drank my morning coffee. Her tone shifted from demanding to begging. "Harper, please, drop the patent claim," she pleaded on a Tuesday. "We are losing everything. We cannot afford groceries. You are destroying this family." On Thursday, her tone turned venomous. "You are a monster, Harper. You planned this trap. You cornered your own sister." I did not respond. I did not feel guilt. I did not feel sadness. I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. They were experiencing the exact environment they created. For 32 years, they demanded I sacrifice my stability to fund Chloe and her mistakes. I simply stopped paying the invoice. On Friday morning, I drove to my cellular provider. I handed the clerk my phone. I requested a new number. I walked out of the store and permanently severed the final line of communication. I did not need to be their scapegoat anymore. 6 months passed. The noise faded. I returned to the laboratory in Burbank. I unlocked the metal door with my own key. I booted up the mixing equipment. I pulled patent number 89432 from my fireproof safe. I did not need a discount manufacturer. I did not need a loud social media campaign. I partnered with an ethical clinical laboratory in San Diego. They respected the science. They sourced genuine cold-pressed botanical extracts. We executed the proprietary emulsification sequence flawlessly. I launched my brand quietly. I named it Baseline Clinical. I did not sell it in flashy retail stores. I did not hire influencers to dance with the product. I took the stabilized serum directly to the professionals who understood the chemistry. I sent sample batches to board-certified dermatologists across the country. I included the clinical trial data and the peer-reviewed lipid structure analysis. The results spoke for themselves. The serum healed compromised skin barriers in days. The doctors started recommending it to their patients. Within 12 months, Baseline Clinical was stocked in over 400 medical offices nationwide. I kept 100% of my equity. I did not take outside investment. I did not sign a single document offering a percentage of my mind to anyone else. The revenue funded further research. I hired Jillian as my general counsel on a permanent retainer. I bought the Pasadena townhouse I had walked away from 3 years earlier. I put 20% down in cash. I painted the front door a deep shade of navy blue. I installed a heavy brass deadbolt. Only 2 people have the key. I sleep soundly every single night. It has been 2 years since I walked out of that rented Hollywood loft. Looking back at the wreckage of the empire I dismantled, I learned one undeniable truth. Sharing a last name with someone does not give them an unlimited line of credit to your mind, your resources, or your peace. Toxic people rely on guilt to bend reality, but gaslighting cannot survive a documented paper trail. And unearned confidence will eventually bankrupt anyone who tries to bypass the hard work. You do not owe your future to the people who took advantage of your past. If you have ever had to walk away from your own family to protect your peace, let me know in the comments. Drop a single word that describes how you felt the day you finally walked out. I read every single one. Subscribe to Sweet Karma Life if you want more stories like this. Check the description for the next video about a woman who let her brother steal her business plan right before a massive tax audit. Keep your receipts, protect your peace, and take care of yourself.